The twin suns of Vyerx 9 were already climbing when my shuttle cut through the upper thermals and settled onto the directorate platform. And I remember thinking that if the universe insisted on burning me alive, it could at least pay overtime. The docking clamps sealed with a metallic groan, and the bay doors opened to applause that wasn't for me, though technically I was the headline act. I stepped out in my execution harness, boots magnetized to the alloy floor, visor filtering the glare, and nodded at the officials who pretended not to stare too long at the man hired to make their traditions permanent. Frontier systems always liked their rituals tidy, and I liked my contracts cleaner than their consciences. They called it balance. Offer a giant, keep the peace. Offer a spectacle, maintain control. I'd learned not to argue theology with people who funded plasma cannons. The directorate liaison, a narrow man with a smile that looked rented, greeted me with the usual pleasantries about honor and stability. I told him I preferred direct deposit and stability in small, unarmed quantities. He didn't laugh, which meant he either had no sense of humor or an excellent one. The containment hangar doors slid open with ceremonial slowness, and the first glimpse of her stilled even the background hum of gravitic generators. She knelt within a lattice of blue energy bands, each one thick as a transit rail, yet she seemed less confined than framed. Sarathiel towered even on her knees, her body elongated and powerful, proportions refined rather than brutish. Her skin carried a faint opalescent sheen, catching the light like polished stone underwater. Long silver-blonde hair spilled over her shoulders and down her back in heavy waves, bright as solar flares, stirring in the artificial wind of the hangar. Her features were striking, high cheekbones, steady mouth, and eyes the color of deep nebulae, luminous and watchful. She was clearly larger than any human structure meant to contain her, yet there was no frantic strain in her posture, only a stillness that made the chains look decorative. I adjusted my wrist console, pretending the biometric spike on my display was from the heat. "Morning," I called up, voice amplified through the translator grid. "I hope they at least offered you breakfast. Rituals on an empty stomach are bad for morale." Her gaze lowered to me, slow and precise, as if I were a distant satellite drifting into focus. The translation implant hummed before her voice emerged, deep and resonant. "Your species worries about morale at interesting times." "Occupational hazard," I said. "We're very committed to feeling awkward." The tech crews moved around us, calibrating the altar platform that would rise from the central pit like a mechanical sunrise. Anti-grav pylons tested their fields with a low thrum, and holographic sigils flickered to life above the hangar, rehearsing the spectacle that would soon be broadcast across the system. Somewhere in the city, crowds were already gathering to watch tradition dressed up as necessity. I ran through the charges on my display: sedition, destabilization, threat to civil order. The language was familiar, comfortable in its vagueness. Giants were always accused of being too large for the room, politically and otherwise. I had long ago stopped asking whether the scale of the crime matched the scale of the accused. My job was not philosophy, it was procedure. Still, as I stepped closer to inspect the energy binds, I noticed how the light traced along the curve of her leg, revealing intricate musculature and faint bioluminescent veins pulsing beneath the surface. She wasn't some mindless engine of destruction. She looked engineered by a civilization that understood symmetry as a form of law. "Do you always joke before killing someone?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, the movement sending a ripple through her hair like a tidal shift. "Only on special occasions," I replied. "Birthdays, holidays, politically convenient sacrifices." For the first time, the corner of her mouth lifted, subtle but unmistakable. The gravitic lattice hummed louder, as if irritated by the exchange. I told myself the unease in my chest was just the altitude and the heat, not the unsettling realization that the so-called monster on the altar carried herself more like royalty than any official I had met that morning. The altar platform rose from the hangar floor with theatrical patience, locking into place beneath Sarathiel's knees while engineers checked energy readings like nervous surgeons. I climbed the maintenance scaffold attached to the outer ring of the containment field, boots clanking against alloy rungs, trying not to think about how small the city would look from her shoulder. My wrist console pinged with biometric updates from her suppressor implants. Heart rate steady, neural spikes minimal. Either she was the calmest condemned being in the quadrant, or the directorate had badly misjudged who was supposed to be afraid. Comfortable? I called up because silence felt heavier than gravity. As comfortable as one can be inside a decorative lightning cage, she replied. Your engineers enjoy dramatic restraint. It's frontier chic, I said. Very in the season. I reached the level of her lower leg, where the official brand was supposed to be visible for ceremonial effect. The charge sheet had described it as a criminal burn, proof of her crimes against civil order. Up close, the scar tissue did not match the crude patterns I'd seen before. This mark was intricate, layered, a spiral crest interwoven with geometric lines that pulsed faintly under the skin as if responding to my proximity. My console tried to classify it and failed twice before flashing restricted archive symbols. That's new, I muttered. Sarathiel's gaze followed my pause. You see it. Hard to miss, I said lightly. Very avant-garde for a supposed terrorist. The translator hummed again. It is not a brand of guilt. It is a seal of lineage. I snorted. Lineage, what are you, royalty? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly, and the containment field flared brighter, warning sirens chirping in irritation. The movement was controlled, deliberate, as if she were testing the tolerance of a machine rather than resisting it. In my world, she said at last, that mark identifies the high line. It is used to protect heirs and mediators. It is not burned upon criminals. I tapped my console again, pulling a back-channel access string I had installed years ago when I still wore directorate colors. The system hesitated, then opened a fragment of an old security archive. The crest matched. Not the public registry version, the classified one. The kind of insignia you don't parade in front of cheering crowds. Well, I exhaled, that complicates my morning. Below us, technicians rehearsed the ceremonial script, projecting holographic charges that painted her as a destabilizing force. The script scrolled across my visor with practiced certainty. Seditious speeches, unauthorized gatherings, threat to frontier harmony. I looked at the mark again, at the subtle bioluminescent threads woven through the scar, and the narrative felt curated. You knew, she said quietly. Knew what? That the ritual is theater. I gave a small shrug she probably couldn't see from that height. Everything out here is theater. Some of us just get better seats. Her lips curved faintly. And do you enjoy your role? I prefer roles where I survive the final act, I replied. But I've learned not to be picky. The wind generators shifted, sending a current through her silver blonde hair, which shimmered like a cascade of liquid light. From this close, her scale felt less monstrous and more architectural, as if someone had sculpted a cathedral and then given it breath. I pressed my palm lightly near the edge of the mark, my glove registering residual energy patterns far older than the supposed arrest date. You're telling me they branded a royal heir and called it justice, I said under my breath. I am telling you, she answered, that power often prefers quiet erasure to open debate. A laugh slipped out of me, sharper than intended. You could have led with that, would have saved us both some paperwork. But as I climbed down the scaffold, the humor felt thinner. The altar systems were synchronizing for broadcast, the twin suns already aligning with the upper skylights to create the perfect silhouette. Somewhere above the hangar, millions were waiting for tradition to confirm what they already believed. I glanced back up at Sarathiel, at the royal crest hidden in plain sight on her leg, and for the first time since I'd taken the contract, the job no longer felt routine. I left the hangar under the pretense of recalibrating my execution rig and locked myself inside a maintenance capsule that smelled like ionized dust and bad decisions. The moment the hatch sealed, I routed my wrist console through an old directorate backdoor I had never admitted existed. The system resisted like a stubborn bureaucrat, then flickered open, spilling classified fragments across my visor in pale blue script. The crest on Sarathiel's leg resolved in full archival clarity, Valeri High Line, diplomatic authority tier, immunity protocols attached. Not a criminal designation. Not even close. The accompanying file logs were scrubbed, overwritten with sanitized charges that read like they had been drafted by someone allergic to specifics. Of course, I muttered. Why imprison a rival when you can ritualize them? A small alert icon blinked, warning me that my access was being monitored. I laughed quietly. Relax, Directorate, I'm just reminiscing. I pulled deeper, into communications records between frontier governors and central command. Phrases repeated with eerie consistency: preserve stability, neutralize symbolic threats, maintain narrative cohesion. It wasn't about Sarathiel destroying cities. It was about her existing as an alternative center of gravity. A royal mediator who could unify dissenting colonies was more dangerous than a warship. The capsule vibrated as the altar systems powered up outside, a low harmonic tremor running through the structure. I imagined her still kneeling in the containment lattice, silver hair catching artificial wind, violet eyes tracking the movements of men who believed they were in control. My console chimed again, live feed test beginning. I closed the archive window, but not before copying what I could into an encrypted shard tucked into my suit's internal cache. Insurance, or suicide, the difference was often timing. When I returned to the hangar, the space had transformed into a cathedral of light. Holographic sigils drifted overhead, chanting in synthesized harmonics. The crowd's distant roar filtered in through the upper vents like the ocean pressing against a hull. Sarathiel watched me approach with that same infuriating calm. "You have learned something," she said. "I learned I should have charged extra," I replied. "Royalty comes with paperwork." Her gaze sharpened. "You access the archives." "Briefly. Long enough to confirm that your so-called brand is older than half the governors on this rock." I stopped near the base of the platform and lowered my voice. "They're not sacrificing a monster. They're removing a symbol." Her expression did not change, but something in the air between us did. "I advocated negotiation," she said. "Coexistence, shared governance. It threatened those who profit from fear." "Fear's a very stable currency," I said. "Never seems to crash." A technician hurried past us, double-checking energy couplings on the anti-grav pylons. The containment lattice pulsed brighter for a second, then settled. I glanced at the control nodes embedded around the altar ring, mentally mapping their redundancies. Ritual systems were designed for spectacle, not resilience. They assumed obedience. "You could still complete your task," Sarathiel said. "You would be praised, paid, protected." "Tempting," I admitted. "I do enjoy being alive." And yet, I looked up at her, at the immense scale of her presence compressed into a kneeling posture for the comfort of smaller beings. The crest on her leg glowed faintly, reacting to the rising energy field. She did not look like a conqueror. She looked like someone being edited out of history. "And yet," I said slowly, "I've always hated bad theater." The altar's central core ignited, projecting a beam of light skyward to align with the twin suns. The broadcast countdown began, numbers cascading across my visor. Security drones took their positions along the perimeter, weapons armed, but disguised as ceremonial ornaments. I flexed my fingers inside my gloves and rerouted a diagnostic command through the altar's maintenance channel, testing how easily it could be persuaded to misbehave. The response came back compliant. Too compliant. Sarathiel's lips curved faintly. "You are considering something unwise." "Story of my life," I said. "But if they're going to stage a spectacle, we might as well improve the script." The broadcast countdown reached 0 with the kind of triumphant fanfare usually reserved for wars no one remembers starting. The twin suns aligned through the upper aperture, pouring light onto the altar until Sarathiel's towering silhouette blazed against the sky. Holographic sigils spiraled upward, narrating her crimes in solemn tones. The crowd's roar surged through the city, a tidal wave of certainty. I stepped onto the central platform, execution rig humming at my side, and felt the weight of a million watching eyes settle like gravity. The Directorate liaison stood at the edge of the ring, smiling that rented smile, waiting for tradition to proceed on schedule. "Citizens of Viarx 9, the announcer's voice boomed, "today we restore balance." "Define balance," I muttered, then tapped the override I had woven quietly into the altar's core. The energy field shifted pitch, a subtle discordant note slipping into the harmonic chant. My visor flashed warnings as I rerouted the ceremonial projection channel away from the scripted charges and into my encrypted shard. Above us, the sigils stuttered, then fractured into a new image, the spiral crest on Sarathiel's leg, magnified until it filled the sky. Murmurs rippled across the crowd. The announcer faltered. The liaison's smile evaporated. "That," I said, amplifying my voice through the altar's broadcast grid, "is not a criminal brand. It's a high-line insignia, immunity tier, diplomatic authority. You're not witnessing justice. You're witnessing a quiet deletion. Security drones pivoted toward me, weapons charging with polite beeps. I sighed. I really should start picking less dramatic hobbies. Sarathiel shifted slightly, and the containment lattice flared. I fed another command into the altar core, redirecting its immense power into the drone network's control channel. Their targeting reticles blinked out one by one, replaced by harmless maintenance icons. Around the perimeter, enforcers slapped at unresponsive rifles. "You're destabilizing the system," the liaison shouted. "No," I replied evenly. "You did that when you mistook fear for governance." The projected archive logs streamed across the sky now, communications between governors. Phrases about neutralizing symbolic threats, about preserving narrative cohesion. The crowd's roar fractured into confusion, then anger. Not at the giant kneeling on the altar, but at the machinery that had framed her. Sarathiel rose slowly as I collapsed the containment grid. The blue bands dissolved into sparks that scattered harmlessly across the platform. She unfolded to her full height with controlled grace, silver blonde hair blazing in the sunlight, violet eyes scanning the city that had gathered to watch her die. She did not strike, she did not roar, she simply stood, immense and undeniably alive. "You risk everything," she said softly, her voice carried through the broadcast without distortion. "Occupational pivot," I answered. "I'm thinking of rebranding from executioner to whistleblower." The liaison attempted to flee. A wave of citizens blocked his path, their certainty replaced with sharp, dangerous curiosity. The ritual had collapsed, and with it, the illusion that giants were monsters by default. I looked up at Sarathiel, no longer seeing a target framed by profit and tradition, but a being deliberately silenced because she represented an alternative future. The job that had once felt like maintenance now felt like complicity narrowly avoided. "You said you advocated coexistence," I told her. Still interested. Her gaze lowered, steady and luminous, more than ever. Emergency sirens wailed across the city as Central Command scrambled to contain the narrative breach. But narratives, once cracked, do not reseal easily. The archive data was already dispersing across private networks, copied, mirrored, impossible to retrieve entirely. I powered down the execution rig and let it fall at my feet. The clang echoed across the altar. "I always hated bad theater," I said quietly. Sarathiel extended her hand, vast and open, not in conquest but in invitation. I hesitated only a moment before stepping onto her palm. The crowd watched as she lifted me slightly, careful, deliberate. From that height, the city looked smaller, its rigid structures fragile against the horizon. The suns continued their ascent, indifferent to politics. Below us, a civilization confronted the truth that the monster on the altar had never been the threat. For the first time since I'd taken this contract, I felt